The 2022 NFL Draft is shaping up to be a little different than recent years. One thing remains the same: the Jacksonville Jaguars making the first overall pick. If the Jags were drafting for need, they could certainly do a lot worse than Alabama left tackle Evan Neal, who could potentially protect the blind side for Trevor Lawrence for the foreseeable future. They could also bolster their pass rush with defensive ends Aiden Hutchinson or Kayvon Thibodeaux. As for who and when the first quarterback will come off the board, for now it looks like a debate between Matt Corral, Kenny Pickett, and Malik Willis out of Liberty. There are many teams drafting in the top 10 that may look in that direction. So who will stand pat or potentially trade up? As for the deepest positional group in the draft, if teams are looking for talented wideouts, there are plenty to choose from. You have the deep ball speedster Jamison Williams, the game-breaking duo out of Ohio State, Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave, to go along with Treylon Burks, Drake London, Jahan Dotson, and George Pickens, who could all potentially hear their names called on day one. So who will make the biggest leap or potentially slide in the draft process? April 28th in Sin City. Can't get here soon enough.
And this is the order for the draft, which is April the 28th in Las Vegas. The Jags with the number one pick for a second straight season. The Giants have a couple of top 7 picks. They have the 5th and 7th picks. And the Jets also have a pair of top 10 picks. They're picking 4th and 10th. Let's do a lightning first-round mock draft with our pals Ryan Wilson and Chris Trapasso. They each have their own first-round mocks, and we're going to go to each one of them for each one of these picks. Starting at the very top with the Jaguars, Ryan, I'll let you go first. Who are you getting to help last year's number 1 overall pick, Trevor Lawrence?
Well, I'm going to the other side of the ball because it's going to be Aiden Hutchinson. And I know the conversation is they don't need an edge rusher. They've taken edge rushers in 2 of the last 3 years, but Aiden Hutchinson is that good for me. And there's going to be trouble trading out of this pick, Chris, because as we'll talk about, the quarterback class isn't a deep class like we saw in the same one with Trevor Lawrence a year ago. So they take the best player available, and Aiden Hutchinson, make the defense better, circle back with all their other high-round picks, second and third rounders, and fix every other hole they have, of course, after they figure out who their head coach is going to be. But offensive line makes sense here, but the best player for me is Aiden Hutchinson.
Yeah, I think to your point, Ryan, this would be an ideal scenario for the Jaguars to trade down. But you're right, they probably won't have a team, dying to get to that number 1 spot like they would have been in any of the previous past, probably 3 or 4 drafts to pick a quarterback. I have them picking Evan Neal, the offensive tackle from Alabama, strictly due to the fact that Trevor Lawrence being protected is the most important thing for this Jacksonville Jaguars organization. I think down the stretch, when he was protected a little bit better, especially in that season finale win over the Colts, you saw Trevor Lawrence see the field better, make better decisions. You need a blindside protector to be that franchise left tackle for your franchise quarterback for the next decade. With his athleticism and size, and just the fact that he's battle-tested in the SEC, I'm going on the other side of the ball with Evan Neal at number 1 overall.
Okay, Evan Neal, the offensive lineman, to help Trevor Lawrence. Ryan Wilson is going to the defensive side of the ball, Aiden Hutchinson. And at number 2, we have the Detroit Lions. And Ryan, Detroit had an opportunity, lose that last game against the Packers. They would have the number 1 overall pick. But this season, I guess just tell us, how much does it really matter if you have 1 or 2? And what are the viable trade opportunities that these teams will or won't have?
Yeah, I think the good news is they won that football game, and Dan Campbell appears to have that team going in the right direction. You don't necessarily have a lot of momentum in a final regular season game going into the next year, but it's better than getting your doors blown off for sure. And what does it mean for trade value? Had they lost, they have the first overall pick. No one's trading for that. Maybe to get Aiden Hutchinson, the local guy, and that's a story for a few weeks. But they get Kayvon Thibodeaux at the 2nd overall pick. And more importantly, they're not taking a quarterback because Jared Goff is their guy. More importantly than that, there's now an opportunity for a team to want to trade up for perhaps either Hutchinson or Thibodeaux or Evan Neal or another offensive lineman at number 2 as opposed to number 1. It'll be a little cheaper. So these are all good things for the Lions. Organization going in the right direction, won their final game against their division rival, the Green Bay Packers. And if all else fails, they get a great edge rusher in Kayvon Thibodeaux to help that young defense get even better.
Yeah, I mean, let's not forget that the Lions already have 2 first-round picks from that Matthew Stafford trade. So they could ultimately maybe swing back and get a quarterback later in the first round. I have them picking Aiden Hutchinson, like Ryan said, the local kid from Michigan. He kind of just feels like a Dan Campbell type, that he is a 3-down defensive end who's going to play hard on every snap, high motor. And I like the fact, too, that he's not just a hustle guy. He's got a refined arsenal of pass rushing moves. We saw how much power he can play with in that Ohio State game. Wasn't great in the college football playoff against Georgia, but this is a defense that desperately needs to get more ferocious, more dynamic along its defensive line, getting after the quarterback. And I think Aiden Hutchinson will be that guy. But if they go Kayvon Thibodeau, that's fine too. Those are the two marquee blue chip edge rushers in this draft class.
Edge rushers to the Detroit Lions at number 2 overall. As we move to number 3, the Houston Texans. Chris, Davis Mills performed very well the second half of the season. You think they hold pat with Mills going into next season? If that's the case, who do they go with at 3?
Yeah, I have them picking Kayvon Thibodeau, the edge rusher from Oregon. I think Mills was good enough down the stretch once their head coach David Culley said, hey, you're the starter. We want to see you play. There's no worry about Tyrod Taylor stepping into your job. And you saw from Davis Mills the big-time throws, the arm strength, some athleticism that made him a third-round pick after barely starting at Stanford. So this will be a team that will look a lot different post-Deshaun Watson trade. But at this point, I think they got all they could have hoped for out of a third-round pick quarterback. Get your franchise edge rusher in Kayvon Thibodeau, who's a little bit raw, but has Myles Garrett-type athleticism.
Yeah, I think Chris is exactly right about what they got out of Davis Mills, exceeding expectations, played well down the stretch. Really no pressure. He wasn't Mac Jones trying to win football games late in the season, but that doesn't matter. He still played better than expectations. And here's something else to think about, Chris, both of you, by the way. If Davis Mills had stayed in school and come out this year, great chance he's the first quarterback taken off the board. So that's basically what the Texans have in this quarterback. So if they're moving forward in that direction, take an offensive lineman to protect Davis Mills. You're going to get a ton of draft capital and players for any Deshaun Watson trade that happens. In the interim, I have them taking Ike Ekwonu out of NC State. He is my number 1 offensive tackle. I remember early in the fall there was a conversation that maybe he's going to have to kick inside, and I was talking to some scouts about it, and they said absolutely not. That guy is absolutely dominant, and you watch him play, that's what shows up week in and week out. I have him going slightly ahead of Evan Neal in my offensive line rankings, and I have him going to Houston in this mock draft to protect Davis Mills.
All right, interesting, Ryan. You got the Jets at 4 now, and I think the Jets would be pretty pleased if they sit there at 4, Ryan, and Evan Neal is still there for them.
And Evan Neal's, who are they taking? So they have Elijah Vera-Tucker, who they drafted last year. They have Mekhi Becton, who they've drafted along the offensive line as first-round picks. And now they get one more piece of that puzzle in Evan Neal. We heard Scott Pioli talk about it yesterday in HQ, that Evan Neal, while he's a fantastic talent, hasn't quite lived up to the expectations this season. He struggled a little bit in that national championship game. And I think that might be sort of the consensus as we get close to the draft process. That said, he's a fantastic player, played really well throughout his career at Alabama, where he played left tackle, right tackle, left guard. And for me, I slot him between Jedrick Wills, who's a high ceiling sort of player, and Alex Leatherwood, who he replaced last year at Alabama. Goes to New York, protects Zach Wilson, who took what felt like 500 sacks this year, and that offense gets a little better with a quarterback now with a year experience under his belt.
Yeah, I mean, how big of an offensive line would the Jets be fielding in that scenario? To have Mekhi Becton at like 6'7", 360, and you pick someone in Evan Neal who is almost equally sized. I would like that for the Jets, but with Neal off the board in my mock draft, I actually have them going with Charles Cross, another SEC blocker, Mississippi State, very young, only 21 years old, but had a phenomenal season in 2021. He's one of the smoothest pass protectors that I've scouted, up there with Tyron Smith of the Cowboys and Jonah Williams of the Cincinnati Bengals. He's not crazy long, but I think he's going to be a riser during the pre-draft process because what he did in those games against Alabama and Georgia and some of those better defensive lines in the SEC. But the Jets absolutely need to prioritize offensive line with their first pick.
Both going with offensive linemen there to help Zach Wilson and the New York Jets at number 4. They will have another pick coming up in the top 10 in just a little bit. Let's go to number 5. And, Chris, it's the New York Giants, who had a terrible finish to the season. They might have been the worst team in the entire league the last month and a half. And you're kind of going with a little bit of a curveball here. Who do you have the Giants taking?
Kenny Pickett, the quarterback out of Pittsburgh. And I know Ryan is going to disagree with me. I just feel like this quarterback class, although we all understand it's not a Trevor Lawrence draft class or a Kyler Murray draft class or a Joe Burrow draft class, that position always gets pushed up by the time we get to the draft on April 28th. And Kenny Pickett, being a New Jersey guy, just feels like someone that Joe Judge will gravitate toward. And if you're Joe Judge, after what's gone on in your first 2 seasons with the team, where a lot of people were really surprised that you weren't fired, you need to make it right at the quarterback position. Kenny Pickett, very experienced, but he had a breakout 2021. I could see him having a Joe Burrow type ascension into the top 5 for a team that desperately needs to prioritize quarterback with their first pick.
Chris, you're right. These quarterbacks always get pushed up. And is this too high for Kenny Pickett? It is for me. But I think if you're drafting Kenny Pickett there and you're asking him to be head coach, I'm actually okay with that because Joe Judge, I don't know what's happened to him, but he appears to be overtaken by aliens with some of the decisions he's made in recent weeks. That said, I'm not going quarterback here. I'm giving Daniel Jones one more chance. We'll see what happens with Joe Judge. He appears to be coming back. I have them taking Kyle Hamilton. They would have loved to have gotten one of the offensive linemen ahead in the mock draft, going just a few picks behind them. Instead, they go with arguably the best player, the best athlete. It's just a matter of making sure you don't ask him to do too much. We saw this in the past with Isaiah Simmons when he left Clemson for Arizona. He seemed lost for a little bit, but once he had a plan, he attacked that plan, and I think Kyle Hamilton is going to be an even better player. Help that defense and Patrick Graham, who's done a great job as defensive coordinator. They have another draft pick coming up soon, so they can address the offensive line if they want to. But right now, I haven't taken the best player on the board.
Giants coming up once again at number 7 because of that trade with the Bears last year for Justin Fields and that draft position. Sandwiched in between those 2 Giants picks, it's the Carolina Panthers. And Chris, you're giving us another quarterback.
Yeah, I'm a man of my word, and I think quarterback will, again, get pushed up. Malik Willis is my favorite quarterback in this draft class. I completely understand that he's raw. He's coming from Liberty. He had that pretty bad game in terms of throwing a bunch of interceptions against Ole Miss, but his team was severely overmatched on offensive line, at the receiver positions. If you watch him play against normal competition where it was a level playing field, Malik Willis can make some of those Justin Herbert and Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes type throws. And after watching that Matt Rule press conference after the season, kind of gave a weird answer about the future for Sam Darnold, didn't seem too confident. That's another organization with a coach that has 2 years under his belt, not a lot of success. They have to look at the quarterback position and figure out what they want to do. I think yes, you'd be taking a risk with Malik Willis, but the potential rewards for picking him makes him worthy of a selection inside the top 10.
Chris, on the surface, I understand Kenny Pickett and Malik Willis going this high. My only concern, and I was actually talking with a front office executive about this, if you're going to take a franchise quarterback, you have to bolster the offensive line no matter what. And I said you have to sell out free agency in the draft because otherwise you have Zach Wilson running for his life, and it's hard to tell whether he's good or not. And they didn't quite go that far, but they understood the theory I was putting out there. That said, I'm not taking a quarterback for the Panthers here, even though they desperately need one. I don't think Sam Darnold's ever going to take another snap at Carolina unless there are injury issues in front of him. And maybe we'll see what David Tepper, the owner, does in the offseason in terms of going after Deshaun Watson, for example. I have them fixing the offensive line. That's the bottom line. No matter who the quarterback is, whether it's Dan Marino or Sam Darnold, you have to protect them. I have them taking Charles Cross, who you had going earlier, Chris. I love his game as well. He came on really strong this year in the SEC against some of the best players on the planet. I think he's going to be a guy you can put in right away, have some success with, and at the end of the day, fix an offensive line for a team that desperately needs to find a way to protect the quarterback.
All right, moving to the Giants pick again, their second pick in the top 7, and a few picks ago, Chris threw us a bit of a curveball and had the Giants picking Kenny Pickett, number 5. So, Chris, who do you have the Giants taking with the 7th overall pick?
Yeah, a lot of what Ryan just said applies here. I have them going with Ike Ekwonu, the offensive tackle from North Carolina State. Ryan and I are both big fans of his game. And I think if you're Joe Judge, that could help you win back the fan base a little bit. Drafting a quarterback and then getting another offensive lineman. He would probably have to play right tackle because Andrew Thomas, the first-round pick of a few years ago, has really come on strong and looks like someone that can be one of the better young left tackles in the NFL. But you need more than one good blocker, of course, with how many good pass rushers there are in today's NFL. Ekwonu is balanced. He's powerful. If you do need him to play guard, he can do that. But going quarterback and then offensive tackle, I think, makes the most sense in terms of positional value for a team in the Giants that has a lot of needs.
Yeah, we're in the same wavelength here, Chris. I have them going also along the offensive line. 2 picks ago, I had them taking Kyle Hamilton. They rolled the dice. They missed out on Charles Cross, who I had going with the very next pick. I have had mock drafts in the past where the Giants take 2 offensive linemen in the first round. I had 0 pushback on it from Giants fans. This time I have him taking Tyler Linderbaum out of Iowa, Hassel's guy there. Let's see, since 2010, 3 centers have gone as high as 18th, and that's as high as they have gone. I have him going, obviously, in the top 10. I think he's that good and that important to what not only the Giants need, but there are plenty of teams in the top 15 picks that could use Tyler Linderbaum. And if he doesn't go here, he will not be long waiting in the green room, virtual or otherwise, once the actual draft rolls around, to hear his name called. I think he's going to be that good of a player.
And he might have the highest floor of anybody, and that might be why teams are willing to take him that high in the draft in the top 10. To number 8 we go, and you guys both like the same player here for the Atlanta Falcons. Chris, tell us why Derek Stingley Jr. would be a good fit in Atlanta.
Well, he checks all the boxes for an outside corner. He's tall, he's twitchy, he's crazy fast. I think he's got sprinter speed. We know that freshman season during that LSU national title year, he was arguably the best player on that defense that was loaded with future NFL players. He does have the injury, but I think once the draft rolls around, when he gets cleared medically, he's going to be one of the higher floor prospects on the defensive side. The Falcons got a great year out of A.J. Terrell. We know that they have at least one more season with Matt Ryan under center or in the shotgun there in Atlanta. And I think Derek Stingley and A.J. Terrell would be a great tandem. The Falcons need to rebuild that defense, and that would be a really good start with those 2 corners.
All right, we are 8 picks into our lightning first-round mock with Chris Trapasso and Ryan Wilson. Nakobe Dean is still on the board. Where do the guys have him going? And when will Ryan have his first quarterback go off the board? Pick number 9 coming up next.
Do you want a sports network that delivers everything that matters about the game? The highlights, the picks, the instant analysis, no yelling, no fake debates, no politics. Hit the subscribe button and never miss a moment.